no meaning in the capital M sense, you are better off at least if you try to do what? It's called creating meaning for yourself in a what kind of a universe? In a world full of nothing. In a world full of nothing. Yeah. Simply because this might be a world full of nothing, it doesn't mean that you ought not to try your damnedest to make something of it. Even if it doesn't mean anything in the grand scheme of things. And by the way, it won't mean anything in the grand scheme of things. By the way, you shouldn't cry about it. You should just accept it. And live life on what? Yeah, accept life on its terms. And to the extent that you can, create what you believe to be a life worth living. And if you want a literary example of this world full of nothing idea, think about Keats. Think about Ozymandias. And by the way, I made that Breaking Bad reference earlier in the course. Well, in the last season, that was actually the name of one of the episodes, as an homage to that poem by Keats. Ozymandias. Yeah, I guess that was the Greek iteration of, or the Greek transliteration of one of the names of the pharaohs, who had built monuments to himself, all symbolizing his what? Symbolizing his greatness. But of course, what happened to him in the end? Same thing that happened to Johnny Carson. For all his money couldn't save him from the crypt. He's rotten away too, just like the rest of us. And I don't want to be too dark about this, but from the moment you're born, you're technically what? You're already dead, because that's the one truly democratic institution. Death. You're all gonna die. Now, of course, why does this, and hold those questions for 1 minute. Why should this matter? Why does this matter to existentialists? Why is death, and this is something else I commented on a few paper drafts. Why is death such a paramount theme in existential thought? And I want to make sure you leave with this. And for those of you who watch the film I Heart Huckabees, the irony should not be lost on you that one of the things in Albert's therapy is he is put into it's supposed to be like a luggage case, but it looks a hell of a lot like a what?
Body bag.
A body bag! There's no irony there. It's supposed to look like a body bag. Once you realize that you're in a sense already dead, that should actually give you a little bit of relief. Because if your life does utterly blow chunks, in cosmic time, remember, it's very short. You'll be dead soon. Now, that fact that you'll be dead soon, you ought to also take as a sort of proverbial lighter underneath your backside. Oh yeah, it's politically incorrect to carry lighters now. Am I right? Yeah, smoking, all that stuff. Yeah, what do I mean by awareness of your mortality ought to be a little bit like a lighter being lit under your backside?
Wouldn't it push you to find meaning?
Yeah! There's no time left to lose, ladies and gentlemen. If I'm going to create my life as a meaningful project that I consider worth living, there's no time to lose. You ought to get to it. And if your life is going to have any meaning worth calling meaning, it's something you're going to have to do. Sartre or Camus would say, God can't give your life meaning, even if there were a God. You'd still be condemned to make your own choices. God can't give your life meaning. Doing what mom and dad tell you to do and living your life as a conscious, semi-conscious robot can't give your life meaning. If anything is going to give your life meaning, it's got to be you. And even if it's not meaning with a capital M, whatever you make of yourself, you are what? The R word. You're responsible for it. And by the way, folks, that is why death troubles Isaac Borg so much. Because he knows that death is one of these. Death is life's fearful period. Just like the end of a sentence, death is that end of your life. Once you're dead, you can no longer continue that process of redefining yourself, of self-creation, to use that Nietzschean phrase. You're done. You can no longer make any of the changes. This is why Warren Schmidt is so troubled. And if you watch the film about Schmidt, please don't make the bollocks mistake that so many students make. They infer that there's a Hollywood ending and that Warren Schmidt is happy at the end. No, he's crying because he knows the only good he did in the world was donate a little bit of money to a starving child in Africa. He's not crying tears of joy. He knows his life is S-H-I-T. And he knows at the end that his life's period is going to be coming very soon. And he knows that he's wasted it. That train passed a long time ago. Yeah, there is no happy ending for Warren Schmidt. Just like there's no happy ending for Isaac Borg. As a matter of fact, the only film I had on that list that has a quasi-exuberant ending is I Heart Huckabees. Because at the end of the film, the two friends get together, accepting that life may have no what? Life may have no inherent meaning. We have to choose our meaningful projects to try to give our lives meaning and to try to edify the world in the way that we see fit. But we just might blank at this. We may just fail. Albert realizes that his fight against suburban sprawl, in the end, might be a what? By the way, Huckabees is like a giant chain store, sort of like a Target or a Walmart. Of course, they want to build yet another superstore. How many damn superstores do we need? I mean, really. But yeah, think of all the blight on the landscape. So Albert, he's an environmentalist. He wants to save what conservatives would call the swamp. Libtards would call them what? I'm speaking like I'm from a blog somewhere. They would call it the wetlands, right? They would call it the wetlands. He wants to save the wetlands from Huckabees basically destroying it. Now he knows what? One little environmental coalition fighting against the corporate behemoth is pretty much screwed from the get-go. And I want that to sound as cynical as it sounds. I want that to sound as cynical as it sounds. However, simply because you're not sure that you're going to win, you can't win unless you what? Yeah, unless you've at least tried. This is why John Paul Sartre, in that essay, I hope you saw this, he says these themes of existentialism should not lead to quietism. If you didn't know what quietism meant, you probably should have done what? You probably should have looked it up. I'll give it to you. Quietism means inaction. Now, why might existentialism lead someone to inaction? I promised I wasn't going to talk this much, but it's important, so I think it's worth it. Yeah.
If nothing matters, then why try?
Yeah. And also, if no matter what I do, I'm not likely to be able to fulfill these grandiose projects, why should I even try either? You could see why somebody like Albert might have said, well, screw it. Because in the end, Huckabees will win. The corporation always wins. That's the way it goes. What if Gandhi said that? I'm trying to speak like Sartre here for a minute. What if Gandhi said that? What if Dr. Martin Luther King said that? What if Ralph Nader said that? Yeah, these might seem insurmountable fights, but occasionally when we persevere enough, we occasionally don't necessarily win with a capital W, but sometimes there are small victories. And by the way, maybe those small victories do what? Matter. And notice when I talk about, I have to say matter and meaning this way, because we've already asserted what about mattering and meaning?
Nothing does.
Yeah, nothing objectively or absolutely does matter or have meaning. Meaning is a construct. We create meaning, if there is to be meaning, in a meaningless world. Or as songwriter Martin L. Gore says, a world full of nothing. I'm all pop culture-y today. Sorry about that. Anyway, it's also old pop culture too. What could be less edifying than getting old and making old people references? Middle-aged. Was that okay, I hope?
42.
Bollocks. Sorry. Yeah.
5 minutes to
All right. I can't say too much here, but what I can at least give you is the 5-minute gist. Now, folks, one of the big differences between William James and everyone we've discussed before is that William James came from where? He's an American. The first American philosopher that we've encountered. William James. William James was also an American psychologist. His main degree was actually as a physician. A lot of people got physicians type degrees. He was a Harvard man. None of that will be on the test, but he also did work in psychology. And he also did work in the psychology of religion. As a matter of fact, a well worth reading book by William James is called On the Varieties of Religious Experience. And if you didn't get this from the chapter or the homework question, William James believed that religion could not be proven as absolutely true. And by the way, this shouldn't be a problem for you if you're a Christian either, because a Christian shouldn't be seeking proof either. Because if you were seeking proof, it would no longer be a matter of faith any longer. Now, William James does not call pragmatism a philosophy. He refers to it as what word that starts with an M? He calls it the Pragmatic Method. And it is a method for getting at what? It is a method for getting at truth. Now, from the outset, ladies and gentlemen, William James was also a student of philosophy. He was very familiar with what two modernist epistemologies from the last test. He had studied British empiricism. He had studied continental rationalism. He was familiar with the works of Locke, Hume, and Descartes. Now, both of these epistemologies had their what? Yeah, they had their strengths and they had their flaws. Now, what William James understood was that there were certain things that could, quote unquote, not be known, could not be verified, nor falsified. But those were the kinds of questions that mattered to people very, very much. Metaphysical questions are by their very nature philosophically insoluble. This is not to say that we cannot have better and worse arguments for solving metaphysical problems. But it is to say that we could never definitively solve a metaphysical dispute. By the way, that claim I just made is derived from the thinking of David Hume. Remember, David Hume rejects metaphysical claims because they are by nature unfalsifiable. Now, what pragmatism is, it is a method for solving, not solving by proving, but for solving metaphysical disputes. Now, as a man of science, William James did believe that when science had found good solutions to problems, we should defer to the scientific method and scientific answers. However, he understood that metaphysical questions were not scientific questions. Therefore, science was mute on them. So keep in mind, this is merely a method for solving metaphysical disputes. Now, what he contends in this method is that we ought to. Now, to say ought is to make something somewhat of an ethical claim here. He says we ought to choose those beliefs that we find to be what? That we find to be useful. And by the way, the metaphor he uses, and please don't screw this up on the test, it's a metaphor. He didn't mean it literally. He speaks of ideas having cash value. This was a metaphor, not to be taken literally. An idea for him has cash value if it has practical psychological payoff. In other words, does it work for you? Does it improve your outlook? Does it help you feel? And this is for him important. Psychologically, folks, we need to feel what he called at home in the world, more than anything else. Now, folks, this has a parallel to existential concerns. Because one of the ways that we sometimes feel at home in the world might be in our quest to find what? Meaning. Thank you. Might be in our quest to find meaning. While William James was not an existentialist, he was not. I would say his concern about what matters does have a parallel to some existential concerns. Now, I don't have time to talk about this now, but I'll run through it quickly on Friday. Two things that he believed could be solved with the pragmatic method were what he called the dilemma of determinism. He believed that belief in hard determinism was psychologically untenable. He believes, for pragmatic reasons, that we ought to believe in free will. He also believes that religious belief has cash value. Even though, as a pragmatist, he recognizes that what religion you choose to believe in will be contextual. In other words, he recognizes that if you were raised in South Asia, there would be a good chance that you would probably be a Hindu or a Muslim. And that Islam or Hinduism would make just as much sense to you as Christianity does to the Christian. In other words, what is likely to work for you will not be an objectively true thing. It will be something that you can relate to. And why can most Americans relate to Christianity? Well, because we are an ostensibly Christian nation. Now, I say ostensibly Christian nation because I think most Christians aren't very good Christians. And I want that to sound just as insulting as it does. You know, they love God, but they hate everybody that's not like them. You know the type? Oh, they love God, but they hate people, they hate folks. Anyway, I talk too much.